So happy to be with all of you to welcome Shabbat in by doing a little digging into Torah with you all, and just thought I would bring us in gently into this space, and we'll also leave with a little song as well. I first want to acknowledge Mariana, who's behind the scenes and running all of our tech for us today, and to thank her and to just shower her with appreciation. And I am incredibly grateful to all of the Wilshire staff who help support all of these wonderful experiences that we're able to bring to all of you. Thanks all of you for being here. If I haven't met you, I am Cantor Kerith Spencer-Shapiro, and our portion for today is Chukat. And I recently purchased this amazing tome, and it's called The Light of the Eyes. And it is a translation of Meorei Naim, which is a Hasidic text, and it's a collection of homilies. And the translation is by Rabbi Arthur Green. And the original work is by Rabbi Menachem Nahum of Chernobyl, who was a disciple of both the Maggid of Mezrich and the Besht, the Baal Shem Tov, who were the founders of Hasidism. He was also a contemporary of those two. He's just a little bit later, but they overlapped, and he studied with them. So so I thought at first I was going to lift something out of this text and share it with you, and it was so hard because the entire thing is just amazing. So so I'm going to share the whole text with you, and hopefully we're going to be able to get through it today. And I hope that reading it will inspire you, reading it together and sharing it and studying it together will inspire you to the extent that it did to me. And if it does, I highly recommend getting this book to delve deeply into some of the more mystical meanings of our Torah portions from this Hasidic source that is now available to us in English if you're not a Hebrew reader. So it's really wonderful. So I'm going to ask Mariana, who has the text, to share on the screen so you can read along with me. Beautiful. So this is at the very top there in the italics is the piece from Numbers, from Chukat, that Rabbi Menachem Nahum is lifting up from the Torah portion. So a lot of these Hasidic masters will just take one little text and then build an entire homily on it. So he takes 2 verses of Torah, and from these 2 verses, he goes off into this amazing and wonderful tangent. And I like to think of some of these Hasidic masters as jazz musicians, because their creativity is so prolific and amazing and astounding, and taking this small seed and coming up with this beautiful teaching. So the seed that Rabbi Menachem Nahum takes are these 2 verses from Numbers. Yud-He Vav-He spoke to Moses, saying, "This is the statute of the Torah. Speak to the children of Israel, and let them take unto you a perfect red cow, having no blemish and never yoked." You may have heard of this part of the Torah. It's often considered incredibly esoteric. How do we even relate to it? Living in the world that we do, we certainly are not doing sacrifices, let alone trying to find a perfect red heifer for sacrifice. So it's very difficult sometimes to connect to these Torah portions that are rooted in the rite of the temple cult in Jerusalem that we no longer are taking part in. But Menachem Nahum really brings this home. So I'm going to go straight into his reading here. And you'll see that as a cantor, one of the reasons that I absolutely loved this text is what he starts with. He says, the Torah is composed of letters, vowel points, and te'amim. So te'amim are not just musical notations, not the way we think of musical notations in Western music, but they are the notations that are used to help us decode how we chant the Torah. So they're symbols that are used in our tikkun, in a book that has both the letters and then these symbols that tell those of us who read Torah how to chant those passages. Musical notations, te'amim, and crownlets. These are these beautiful little flourishes that exist on many, but not all, Torah scrolls. This, however, is only the revealed Torah. All of it can be accessed by the human mind, each according to one's own level. But the light within the Torah, that of which the sages said, the light within it will bring them back to goodness, is the quality of the naught, N-A-U-G-H-T. So that which cannot be grasped. So what is Menachem Nahum referring to when he speaks about the naught? The word in Hebrew is ayin. Any of you who have even beginning Hebrew will know that ayin is a letter. It's also the word for eye because the letter ayin, it looks like this and it looks like an eye, okay? But ayin also has this other meaning, and that is the meaning of emptiness, of the void, So the light within the Torah that brings us back to goodness is the light of the void, the light of nothingness, of the great emptiness, that which cannot be grasped. It is beyond any reason. And here is the play on words that our Hasidic masters, or one of the play on words that our Hasidic masters are so skilled at doing. So reason in Hebrew, ta'am, can also mean reason. Ta'am is the singular of that word ta'amim, musical notations. So he's taking this to say, you know, the way that we read Torah is connected to putting reason into the Torah. But this, when we really want to study Torah, when we really want to access the light within the Torah, it's actually beyond the ta'am. It's beyond the reason. We can't just grasp it with our minds only. It is the source from which the Torah flows, the creator. And here is a completely radical statement. In this way, Yud, He, Vav, He, and the Torah are one. This is a typical Hasidic teaching in many ways, because in Hasidism and in many streams of mystical Judaism, there are teachings that say that everything is God. There's nothing but God. It's just our human incapability of seeing what is before us, that we're God. I'm God, you're God, the table's God, my cup of tea is God. It's all God. We just are not capable of grasping it. So in some ways, this is very typical Hasidic teaching, but in some ways it's very radical in saying that God and Torah are the exact same thing. There's nothing different between them. Everyone who engages with Torah has to become vitally engaged with its inner light. And you'll remember the name of this collection of his teachings, of Menachem Nahum's teachings, is Meor Einaim, the light of the eyes. So he's very concerned with light. Everyone who engages with Torah has to become vitally engaged with its inner light, the not, the emptiness, the nothingness, beyond all ta'am, beyond all reason. This is why the musical notations of the Torah are called te'amim, even though they are highly elevated, meaning not everyone has access to them. It's still possible to find meanings in them. You can still figure it out. You can learn how to read Torah. You can learn how to chant Torah. You can learn how the te'amim are chanted. But in that inwardness called not, but that inwardness called not, that inwardness, that place of real true connection to God. And he's saying also Torah, because Torah is God in his view. That inwardness called not, called the ayin, is beyond any such access. The learner, so he's addressing us right now, we are the learners. The learner has to cleave to the light that flows forth from it. This will surely restore you to goodness. That sounds good to me, being restored to goodness. I don't know about all of you. As we're opening up, I see people in sometimes in extremis, people getting very disturbed very easily and quickly at short fuses, right? Or the opposite, just people walking into the world with incredibly open hearts, ready to connect, ready to burst forth with compassion. Kanina, are you raising your hand? You have to unmute.
Yes, I did. The sentence, Dibra Torah bilshon bnei Adam, the Torah spoke in the language of people, kind of like shakes a little bit this whole paragraph, because you're really trying to see how it will connect to everybody, not just the Hasidic movement. And the word ayin, which means yes and I, And the word ayin, which means there isn't any, it's not the same because the roots are not the same. Ayin means there isn't anything there. And ayin is what you can see. There is something there. So they don't mean the same and they cannot be combined as the same. I respect what he has to say in his writing, but these things kind of like avoid regular human beings who are not really Hasidic and very, very, how would I say, one road way of thinking from relating to whatever it is that was going on. And I think
so Penina, I want to put us in his historical context, because when we think about Hasidism in today's world, we think about it one way. But when Menachem Nahum was writing, what was Hasidism about? It was not about one way. It was actually about Torah is for everyone. It's not just for people with a certain learning. It's not just for people with, so absolutely. And I think, there is a neo-Hasidic movement that is saying these teachings are not just for one type of people. These teachings are for everyone. They were meant for everyone. Right. So I think we have a right to claim them. They are part of our heritage.
Yes. And how are we to translate the paragraph is also very personal.
Yes.
So, and also that it should fit the times and whoever is really listening to it. Absolutely. So, okay, I'm listening. I'm trying to see what he's trying to say. But I think also that the Hasidic movement developed because the situations around them were so bad that they needed the spiritual world to connect to make life easier. So I understand all these translations of another world, of a spiritual world, but I also see why and where they came from.
Yes.
So, okay, it's hard for me as an Israeli born.
It's not just like I said, I think of them as jazz musicians. They take a seed and then they build a whole world from it.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So it's like going on a ride.
I'm going.
Maybe it's a roller coaster that you don't really like so much.
Or I like because I see somebody else's point of view. It's
not what is written in Torah. He is definitely, how do you get here? He's completely making a sacrifice of a red heifer, finding the one with the perfect, no blemish. I can't have a hair that's different from the rest of them. And all of a sudden he's talking about restoring us to goodness.
Yeah, well, because feeding people, when in doubt, eat. You know how it is.
Yes.
So I think this is exactly what was happening there. They were given a chance to, okay, now we're going to eat and we're going to do some kind of like amazing spiritual event. And we're all going to share it and we are going to, And of course, the perfect cow is to make it hard on them because eventually the korbanot, everybody, we did away with.
That's right. That's right. So I think part of his job, right, is to make, and I think this is, for me, what makes this really pertinent to us today, is that for me also, the korbanot, okay, I'm a vegetarian. And I have no interest in restoring the temple cult. I'm also a Jewish professional, so that's not what I'm interested in. And yet this connects me to Torah, these teachings that connect me to Torah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, all right, let's go back to his teaching here. So he says that when your innermost self cleaves to the Torah's inner light, you yourself become a throne for God's presence that flows through Torah. So he's going to be talking a lot about light, and we're going to see this connection of light and Torah as he continues. Yes, it is true that when learning, you need to exercise understanding and to seek out reasons. So absolutely, when we're reading the Torah, we should know what it's saying. We should understand the actual translation. Yes, we need to use our reason to get there. But in order to attain wholeness, you need this light as well. For this is the Or Haganuz, the light hidden for the righteous. Hidden, as the sages said, within the Torah. So, if you want Torah to be effective in making you good, seek out the flowing light within it, that from which Torah itself is derived. So he's, again, reminding us, Torah isn't just these words. Torah is an emanation of the divine. And in fact, in his mind, they are one and the same. So he says, this is referred to as a cow, as in the sages' teaching that more than the calf wants to suckle, the cow wants to nurse. The source of flow is called cow, and so too is the hidden light flowing forth from the Torah. So in order to understand what he's saying here, we need to understand this phrase that he's talking about. More than the calf wants to suckle, the cow wants to nurse. And so this is a very frequently quoted rabbinic saying that was originally used to describe the relationship between teachers and students. And the teachers in this instance would be the cow, and the students being the ones receiving that sustenance, that nourishment. But it's even more than the students want to learn. The teacher wants to share out of love that teaching, and they're using this idea of the mother cow and the calf. He's really getting at this idea of the relationship between teacher and student being one that is based on chesed, being one that is based on loving kindness and mutual wanting to give sustenance, but especially from the point of the teacher, that the teacher is just overflowing with this kind of love to give to their students. And then, yeah, it's lovely. And then what he does is he says, it's not just the teachers that are the cow, it's the Torah. It's the Torah that is the cow, that is overflowing with love for all of us to receive, if we are able to access that hidden light and receive that hidden light. So he goes on and he says, now Torah itself is called by Moses' name, as in, remember the Torah of my servant Moses. This is from Malachi. When we engage in Torah, he says, we need to take the not, the emptiness discussed here, and attach it to the revealed Torah, the Torah of Moses. What he's talking about here is the written Torah, as opposed to the oral Torah. And he's making a distinction here between these two things. Thus, he says, will Torah itself become whole as God intended it, a pure and brilliant shining light through the letters called the Torah of Moses. So he's taken us away from tangible things, but then he's bringing us back to the tangible letters of the Torah, like he talked about at the beginning, right? The letters that are actually written there, and asking us to envision that there is actual light behind those letters shining through for us to receive as we engage in the study of Torah. So those of you who have seen a Torah scroll know that the letters are incredibly dark on a very light background. And so it is not that much of a stretch to envision that there is light emanating forth behind the actual letters. He goes on and says, this is, am I in the right place? Yes. This is speak to the children of Israel and let them take unto you. To that Torah called by your name, the revealed Torah of Moses, they have to take a perfect red cow. So now he takes this very tangible thing that was an actual cow and he's completely turning it around. He's saying, actually, it's not a cow. It's actually this teaching of loving kindness, this teaching overflowing like a mother who needs to give sustenance to her child, and for whom that experience is filled with love, and that the people need that sustenance. So they have to take a perfect red cow, a flowing source that shines within Torah, called red because of its brilliant color and inconceivably pure light. Then it will be perfect with the wholeness that God intended. It may also be called perfect in the sense explained by the Baal Shem Tov, and I said earlier he was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, who said that the Or HaGanuz, the hidden light, remains perfect in innocence, since only very few people have ever reached it. And when he says only very few people have ever reached it, I think, when the Besht is teaching that, he's not even necessarily referring to himself. It may be just a goal that is not necessarily reachable, but something that we try to get to. It's just the tzaddikim, not for us to think that we can actually get there, but that we should aim toward that goal. The Torah of Yud He Vav He is perfect, means that the quality of Torah that is called Torah of Yud He Vav He and not Torah of Moses remains pure, because so few have trod the path to it or reached its rung. So he makes a distinction here about living Torah and the written Torah. So we can receive the written Torah, and that's beautiful, and hopefully we see the light emanating behind it. But the Torah of Yud He Vav He is still esoteric. We don't know what God's intentions for us are. And in order to reach them, we have to connect with that knot, with that ayin, connect with that hidden light. And that is so very, very difficult to do perfectly, that it's something that really is actually not necessarily attainable, which I think reflects how we maybe all feel. I certainly don't walk around saying, I know exactly what God wants me to do. So that was true also for Menachem Nahum and for his followers as well. But he says, in these generations, every whole person, and I love that he uses this phrase, whole person, certainly something that we can, this is where we can be, right? We can't be the tzaddikim, but we can be a whole person. Every whole person has to make the effort to get there. This is having no blemish. Oh, and by the way, Penina, like he's not just speaking to his Hasidim here, he really is saying these teachings and this Torah, it's for everybody. So he says, this is what it means having no blemish, which can also be read, not having it is a blemish. Blemish, he says, is a lack. Again, not how I would think about blemish. I think of blemish as something that's there, not something that's not there. But he says blemish is a lack. And the Torah of Moses will be lacking until the whole person becomes aroused to be attached to this quality of nothing. Why is that? Because she is never yet yoked. Such a person has not taken on the yoke of heaven's kingdom and thus become whole. But that is indeed the only way to wholeness. Onkelos translated statute of Torah as the cut decree, gezerah, of Torah as God commands it, meaning that you have to reach toward that source from which Torah was cut or hewn. What is that source? The source is divinity. the source is the nothingness, the void. The source is that or, the hidden light, or Haganuz. Then you may be called a complete servant of Yud He Vav He. So that is his teaching. Mariana, you can get rid of that. Thank you so much for helping us out with that text. So that is his teaching on this incredibly esoteric text, which is, just very, very difficult to connect to as a modern day Jew, as a Reformed Jew, as a Jew who, my guess is that there's no one on this call who's like daring to reestablish the temple cult and the sacrifices in Jerusalem. So this is a way to look at this text and make it tangible to us, asking us to really know that these teachings are for all of us, and our job is not just to understand the words and understand the intent of each phrase or sentence as it's uttered, but maybe just take a step back and to allow this to wash over us and to receive it as that immense emanation of light and love, and to allow ourselves to be like the baby calf, receiving nourishment from its mother. And I think it's a wonderful image. For me, it's a wonderful image to take with me as I enter Shabbat, after a week where it's been a lot this week. I don't know how all of you have experienced the opening, but I'll be frank with you. I'm feeling all the things at once. I'm feeling excitement about it. I'm feeling trepidation, so many feelings. And so to at this moment, say to myself, yes, I can take this nourishment. I can sit back and allow it to flow over me. Yes, I am ready to receive the light. I am ready to receive the loving kindness and compassion. And I hope you're all ready to receive it as well. And I offer it with love to all of you as we get ready to enter Shabbat. And here on this campus on Wilshire Boulevard Temple's University campus, this is our first evening back in person together. We're expecting 300 people to be here. So it's amazing and wonderfully exciting, and a moment that's full of light. So I've talked a lot, and I'd love to hear from all of you how this teaching sat with you. I know it may be a different way of looking at Torah text for some of you. So please unmute yourselves and say hi. Merle, go ahead. Hi.
I felt like I really liked this. I felt like that light was very modern feeling. I mean, I don't know when he wrote this, when they put this together, but I felt like it was very modern feeling. And when I study Torah, I look at it, yes, what was written whenever, but now I look at it too as what's happening in our world now. And whether it's my own personal world, the overall world, my family's world, whatever, I just found the light being another way of looking at it with today's modern world. That's the best way I can say it.
The amazing thing is that he was teaching in the 1700s.
Okay.
So just take that in perspective. I mean, that is not contemporary, right?
No, not at all.
I agree with you. It feels incredibly contemporary. And, I think one of the sad things for us as Reformed Jews is like, we say, well, we're not that, right? So Hasidic teachings, that's not for us. But the teachings of the great Hasidic masters are so beautiful, and they feel really contemporary because they were not created just for Torah scholars. They were created for everyone, so that everyone should have access, everyone should have equal access and learning Torah, and that it should connect to your everyday experience, that you should be able to be uplifted spiritually just as much as, you know, the most learned Torah scholar. So with that in mind, I do, you know, for me, these teachings are just amazing. And for their time, they were completely, like, we tend to think of, oh, Hasidism, that's traditional Judaism, okay? Well, not so. Hasidism and Reform Judaism came about at exactly the same time. They were different responses. And so this was completely radical to look at the Torah like this. So I think it belongs to us. And I certainly make a claim for myself that it belongs to me. And Merle, I give you permission to do the same for yourself.
Oh, I thank you. I just ordered the book.
It's a fascinating book.
It's one more way for me to study Torah. But your comment just now about people saying it's not for us as Reformed Jews, I think a lot of that theory in a lot of cases that I've seen my whole life are people that I'm not sure they're Reformed Jews, but they're Jew. They don't really practice. They practice, but very limited. They certainly. I mean, I have friends that think I'm wacko because I do Torah. I have friends that don't understand why I go to services on Friday night or Saturday morning, or I do a lot of the things that I do. They think, you know, but they also, to me, and this is weird, but to me, it fits in, having been a Jewish professional for so many years, it fits into the realm of drop-off, or then it was drop-off Judaism. You drop your kid off and you don't really want to know anything about it. And then the day the kid's bar mitzvah, you're out of there.
Yeah.
You know, and
I think there's also I think it's not just about being Jewish, but I think there's a human quality of defining self by what self is not. And it's much easier when we try to do a self-definition and a reflection. It's much easier to say, well, I'm not that, right? Instead of I am something. So it's a wonderful exercise, I think, for all of us to put it in the positive, right? What am I? What do I believe in? Not based on what is it that I don't think I'm a part of, but what are the attributes that are important to me? What are the ideas that are important to me? And I think it's much easier to say, well, I'm this and I'm not that, than to really do that deep self-reflection and think, what are the things that I truly care about? And you look, we're all busy. We don't necessarily make time to do these things, but I think that they can be incredibly helpful in becoming the way that Menachem Nahum talks about it, becoming a whole person. And I think that that's what Judaism really encourages us to do. It's why we have Hashuvah.
Question.
Yeah, Debbie, hi.
Hi everybody. Hi, Kerith. So if Torah is God, but then did you also say that Torah is cow because cow is like mother, like nurturing and teaching?
Yeah.
Kind of like, so you have to think of it kind of like both like that too.
I mean, look, that's why I say he's like a jazz musician, right? He's like, he's like riffing. It's completely
about a cow. It doesn't kind of go together like Torah and cow.
It doesn't. I mean, the first time I read it, I laughed out loud.
Okay.
And then I went back and read it again because I was like, did I read that correctly? Oh, yes, I did. And it's, it's just a great creativity and utilizing a lot of different metaphors.
Yeah, the metaphor, I like that.
And so I think sometimes people look at Torah and I want to know the truth with a small t, right? I want to know exactly what this means, what was meant by it at the time. It's a little bit of a fundamentalist lens, right? Like, what is the original intent of this and what was meant by it and what does it mean? That is not how Menachem was looking at the Torah.
A couple of times that you said that Torah is cow, like so I'm metaphor. Well, I'm looking into that metaphor. I'm thinking about it. Cow is loving kindness, like the mother sustaining the.
Exactly. So he wants us to think of ourselves as little babies, which also I think connects us back to that idea of ayin, right? Like a little baby doesn't have preconceived notions. A little baby is like a tabula rasa, right? An empty slate. So it's that void, that beautiful nothingness, right? That is ready to receive loving kindness. And that is in his teaching, that's what emanates. It's that mother's milk. Torah is the mother's milk flowing toward us. And our job is to be the little babies receiving sustenance. Yeah, Penina.
Okay. The fact that only few will anointed to understand that and become tzaddikim kind of left a lot of people thinking that they are not good enough. And that might not be a very healthy way of looking at life. So instead of believing in themselves that they, yes, they can do all this and everything, it didn't change life for them. And even it didn't change life for the ones who became really tzaddikim. So I'm looking at from the practical point that it's like you living in this spiritual thing, and then some of them get it and some of them don't, but either one of them, life changed for them. Even the good ones that were there, life didn't change for them.
Right.
Well, with the environment that surrounded, that caused this whole Hasidism to flourish.
Sure.
So I'm not against the Hasidim because I think it was an amazing way of life because it kept them together for sure. And protected them spiritually from a lot of evil that was going on around them.
Yeah.
But if you look at it practically, but from a practical point of view, they didn't really benefit out of it as far as their independence, as far as their quality of life. And yes, they kept the Sabbath and they were together, and the togetherness was amazing, and they had great teachers and great thinkers, but it still was like a cocoon.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it did not protect them from whatever was going on in the world around them, an immediate world around them. It started in Russia, persecuted constantly, and and you know the rest.
I think
have to talk about that. I'm just looking at it. That didn't shield them.
No, it did not. It did not.
It made them
absolutely not.
As a nation.
I think there are two points that I think are important. One is that I think the intent of saying this is only for tzaddikim, there are only like 36 of them living in the world at a time. So it's not like I think the idea was it's okay that you don't get there. So hopefully, if you're a good teacher, and it's certainly my intent to not say, try, you can do it. You can actually maybe do this. No, just try to be the best. And if
Right,
you try to be the best, then you're a whole person.
right.
But if you don't actually get there, that's okay, because, you know, it's only 36 people in the entire universe that can. And to think that I'm going to be one of those 36 is putting a little bit too much pressure on myself. So I think that was the intent of that, being taught that way. As far as did this help them? No, I mean, we know what happened in Eastern Europe, but I don't think anything could have helped them. And I think these teachings were meant as teachings for the soul. And that, as you said, in these very, very difficult times, I think we're also living in very tough times. That one thing we can do, and especially as we head toward Shabbat, one thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to try to be that whole person, and to try to be open to loving kindness, and to try to emanate that loving kindness and that hidden light. Yeah. Not easy, really not easy stuff, especially looking at, you know, historically, because we want there to be something. We want there to be something that could have changed things for the people living in Eastern Europe at that time, knowing what was coming. We want there to be, and certainly these teachings were not able to do that. But I don't think they were intended for that purpose. I think they were intended, as you said, to help people get through difficult times. And I think that's why they can be powerful in this moment. Because we're living through difficult times, and they're beautiful. And you know what?
We have more options.
Yes, and we need beauty in our lives. We need to make time and space for it. So I actually think that's a perfect segue to move back to our beginning prayer, and to say Shabbat Shalom. It's been so nice to be with you all. Thank you for taking time out of your day, and I hope I'll see some of you tonight in person. And if not, you can join us on their services online and in person. Shabbat Shalom,
I can't get there, but because I don't live there.
That's right, Merle. But there's
I'm
an
with
online
you all the way.
Shabbat Shalom, friends.
Shabbat Shalom. Toda rabba. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you,
Shabbat
Pina.
Shalom. Thank
See you
you.
tonight.
This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, Pamela. Shabbat Shalom, Nan. Shabbat Shalom, Merle. Shabbat Shalom, Debbie.